You need a body shop? You need engine repair? Auto Excellence, Collision Specialists, 631 261 6420. That's 631 261 6420. Auto Excellence.
Now I'm feeling uneasy. Get through to you somehow. It's just for a short time. It wasn't my fault. I just couldn't win. The things that I said, they hurt you again. And if you don't, let me down easy. Always on the run, with the backs up against it all. No need to lose your mind, so just let it pass on. It wasn't my fault, I just couldn't win. The things that I said, they hurt you again. And if you don't, let me down easy.
Good evening and welcome to Wrestling Rewind. I am your host, Angel Amoroso, and I am joined by my co-host, the Iron Man, Tommy Cairo.
What's happening?
And this evening, our guest for an interview is Jeffrey T. Capo.
How you doing, everyone?
How are you?
Good.
So we want to get into your history, who you are, where you're from, who you were trained by, who you're famous for working with, what your position is and has been in wrestling. So, get us started off. Let us know who Jeffrey T. Capo is.
All right. Well, I guess we'll go way back to the beginning. I started watching wrestling in the early 70s. I am from the Baltimore area, so I watched it on Channel 45 here in Baltimore. Actually, I like to watch it. It was a double feature. It was wrestling and roller derby were on back-to-back here in Baltimore, so I watched both of those. And, of course, being from Baltimore, it was all WWF wrestling at the time. So I like guys like Ivan Putski and the Samoans and all that was going on there. And I was always watching it, always loved it, as a fan and everything. And then 1985, I went to my first live show at what was then the Baltimore Arena. It was a WWF house show, and the main event was Roddy Piper and Cowboy Bob Orton against Jimmy Superfly Snuka and the Tonga Kid in a Texas Tornado match.
Oh, nice.
And the best thing I remember about that, because the configuration was a little different than it is now, but the wrestlers would actually walk in an aisle that was kind of diagonal off the ring to the back. There was no walkway, there was no ramp or stage like they have now. So I happened to be sitting on the aisle, on the end of the aisle, and I remember as they were walking by, I got to reach out and kind of touch Jimmy Snuka on the shoulder.
Oh,
so that was kind of like a big moment, for me to actually do that. And I kept watching wrestling through the 80s and all that, and started discovering the other wrestling promotions that were out there. Again, this was a time that the NWA was really pushing into the Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia markets. Started catching the AWA on ESPN, World Class Championship Wrestling, all those promotions that were on TV at the time. And then one day I was taking classes here at Catonsville, what was then Catonsville Community College. It's now CCBC Catonsville, which ironically I now live next door to. And I happened to walk by, and I'm walking down the hall, and I see this flyer on the wall. And of course, when you go to a college, there's all kind of flyers for activities and everything going on. But this one caught my eye. It said, "Do you want to meet NWA wrestlers?" And it had some pictures of some wrestlers on there, and it had like a little pull tab, a little number at the bottom. And I pulled it, and I called the number. And what it was someone that we're all familiar with, Joel Goodhart. Joel had started the Squared Circle Fan Club, of course, in Philadelphia, through his radio show. Well, he decided he was going to branch out and start running Squared Circle event in Baltimore. So I called the number, and I talked to two gentlemen. I talked to Dan Schnitzer and Tony Feller. They were running the Baltimore branch for Joel, and their first big luncheon they were having in Baltimore happened to be Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express, which was Bobby and Stan, and this was May of 1989. So it was right after they had won the NWA World Tag Team titles, and of course they held the NWA US Tag Team titles at the same time. So we had a luncheon at what was the Baltimore Original Sports Bar, and got there, got some pictures taken with them, and all that kind of fun stuff. And a bunch of us were talking, and I kept hearing some people kept talking about independent wrestling. And I was like, well, what is that? What is? I'd never really heard the term before, and I wasn't. Yep, there's the picture. There's the picture of me when I had hair and glasses, which both are gone now. So
right.
So that was a lot of fun. So I said something to Joel. I said, what is this independent wrestling? Is there somebody local that's running, around here that I could, go see a show or whatever? He said, wait a minute. And he said, let me go get somebody. So he goes off and he comes back and he says, has a gentleman with him. He said, Jeff, this gentleman is Ed Zahn. Ed is running a group called Atlantic Wrestling Federation. They're running here in Maryland and Pennsylvania. He goes, I think, he's having some shows soon. He said, you might want to go. So, Ed introduced himself to me and we talked a bit. And he said, I got a show coming up in June in York, Pennsylvania, which was only right up the road. I went to high school there, so I was familiar with the town. And it was at the Vonnie B. Grimes gym, and it was AWF. And I went to the show, and I was just totally blown away. I had never experienced anything like this. Again, obviously, it was a smaller venue, but the crowd was super hot. The show was great. There were local guys on the show. There was Nikita Koloff was actually on that show because he was not working for the NWA at that time. So he was doing independent bookings and stuff like that. So I was absolutely hooked at that point with independent wrestling. I said, I've got to get to do this. And I kept talking to Ed, and he said, well, I'm running another show here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the Buck Tractor Pool, which was an outdoor venue. And I went to that show, and I got to the show, and I talked to Ed, and he said, I had my camera with me. And he said, well, why don't you take pictures for me? I said, okay, well, where do you want me? He goes, oh, right here at the ring. And I'm like, you're serious? You want me to stand there and take ringside photos at your show? He said, sure. He said, no problem. And there was quite a few people on the show. Wendy Richter was on the show, Heidi Lee Morgan, Nikolai Volkov, Alpha, the Wild Samoan was on there, and then there was other local guys that were on that show. We had a good time, and that's when Ed and I really bonded. Ed and I really struck up a really good friendship at that point. And Ed just kind of took me under his wing and mentored me and taught me all about the business. I mean, he just laid it all out. He said, here's what's going on. Here's what, we can do and all this type of stuff. So we continued to work through AWF. And then in 1991, we got involved with a group called Universal Independent Wrestling, which was here in Baltimore. Now, the fun thing about Universal Independent Wrestling, we actually were on television. We were on one of the major networks. We had a deadly time slot, though. It was on at Monday morning at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Wow.
We got it. But the thing of it was, we actually drew rating points. We were the first show ever to draw rating points at that time slot. And they were on there. I forget how many weeks they were on. It was like 16 or 18 weeks worth of shows. You can find them on YouTube. They're available on YouTube now. But there was guys like Axel Rotten, Agent Orange, Golden Phoenix. There were a bunch of guys that were mostly local, the Baltimore, Pennsylvania type area. A lot of the guys from AWF, the Cream Team were there. The Lords of Darkness, which was Barry Hardy and Dwayne Gill, which of course everybody knows as Gilbert, were on that show, and then we ran a lot of TV on that. And then unfortunately, it got to the point that unfortunately, as we all know in wrestling, egos kind of take hold. So it got to the point that Ed and I decided we weren't going to do UIW anymore. We just decided to get away from UIW and then start our own group. And this is where we came up with Wrestling Independent Network. which you showed a poster there, which I have the T-shirt here. This was our official T-shirt with the logo that you can see. I designed the logo myself.
Nice.
We came up with it, and we were strictly a house show product. We didn't have any TV, and we didn't want any TV. And the poster you showed there was our debut show in Baltimore. We had an attendance of 2,000 people, 2,000, and to this day that is still a record in the state of Maryland for an independent wrestling show.
You got the Honky Tonk Man versus Nikolai Volkov as the main event. Scotty Totti versus Tom Brandy.
Actually, Scotty didn't make the show. Scotty contacted us. He something happened. He couldn't be there. And what we did was he actually sent an audio tape because, again, we're talking 1992, so technology was now. And we actually had King Kalua fill in for him. And of course, King Kalua and Tom have wrestled each other all over the place, and that's still going on. That those guys are still there wrestling, and kudos to both of those guys for still going. As you see, we had the Lords of Darkness versus the Cream Team. We had a ladies match with Misty Blue and Linda Dallas, which actually that one wound up being the main event of the show. We had to switch things a little bit because what happened was we didn't expect that amount of people. And what happened was Julia Blanton, who was our PR person, and Julia's worked a lot in the wrestling business. Her brother wrestled as the Punisher, Tommy Rose, in Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania. She got with one of the local weather newscasters, Tony Pagnotti, and found out he was a big Honky Tonk Man fan. Oh. Tony did the weather forecast for that day from the venue, and it was on TV. So we just kept getting walk up. We were expecting maybe 400 or 500 people, and people just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And we had to keep putting chairs out. And we had to keep, and so we delayed the whole card for like an hour just to try to get everybody in the building. So there were a lot of kids there because, again, it was for a charity event for cystic fibrosis. So what we did was we shifted the Honky Tonk Man Nikolai Volkov to earlier in the card for the kids because we knew that it was getting late. We didn't want people walking out and not seeing those two guys wrestle. So, but it was an amazing show. And we continued on for him for about another year or two. And then unfortunately, things kind of went south and Win kind of disappeared. And then I was up in Pennsylvania at that point, and then we got involved with American Commonwealth Wrestling with a gentleman by the name of Mark Bodie. Mark ran ACW, and we got involved with him, and we ran a bunch of shows, and we actually did a big TV show called Salk and Slam, which was broadcast on local TV up there. And we really enjoyed that promotion. That was really good. It was really good shows. We actually, going back actually to the Win show, one of the biggest matches we had on the Win show was Bob Backlund versus Paul Warrendorff. Oh, nice. And that match was actually featured. They had a big 3-page article in PWI magazine about it.
What year was that, Jeff?
That was, I think that was 92.
Oh, nice.
So that article actually got noticed and actually got them back into the big leagues. So Bob obviously went back to WWF where he won the title again, and Paul wound up back in WCW. So again, by highlighting those guys, we were able to do that. And then, like I said, ACW was going for a while, and then we had started working with ECW at the time, which was still Eastern Championship Wrestling. It was still early on in that because we had worked, we had worked with Joel for a bit through Tri-State. Of course, then Tri-State went under, and then Todd Gordon picked up the pieces and started ECW. So we started working with them. One of my most interesting times was we had a show where we had Terry Funk and Chris Benoit on a Win show and an ACW show. We actually drove them, myself and Tim Walker, drove Terry Funk and Chris Benoit to the ECW show. So I got to spend 2 hours in the car with Terry Funk and Chris Benoit.
Nice.
I never laughed so hard in my life. Terry Funk was just trying to get under Chris's skin so bad because Terry was like, "Oh, when I was NWA champion and we went up to the Hart's family's house and everything, there were cats everywhere, and the cats were all over the tables and chairs, and you couldn't move it." And I was watching Chris because I was in the back seat with Chris, and Terry was in the front with Tim. and Chris kind of just cracked a little smile and all that, and he didn't really respond to it, but that was very interesting to do that.
He told the story about the cats messing all over everything. And
yeah, he said they would serve dinner and they would just shoot a
flipping
cat
the spatula with it.
right. He said, yeah, they would just shoot the cats off the plates and wouldn't even clean the plates and put your food on top of it and all that,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. And he was just, like I said, Tim and I mean, tears are running down our face and everything, and it was just absolutely hysterical, that we were doing that. And then, unfortunately, about right after that time, that tragically, Mark Bodie and his fiancee were killed by a drunk driver.
Oh.
So that kind of,
Remember that was horrible.
that was absolutely horrible. Mark was, they were both so young, and to, to go out like that was just absolutely terrible.
Mark was such a great guy. I remember him running in Steelton.
Yeah, we did the Steelton shows and stuff.
Yes,
like
yes.
He was actually the first one to have. He was actually the first one to have Terry Funk and Sabu.
Right.
That match actually happened before it happened in ECW, which apparently ECW called him. They tried to get him to call it off, and he said no. He's like, I've already booked these guys. We're running the show, and they did it. They ran the match. So that was the actual debut of Terry Funk versus Sabu. Was actually in ACW and not ECW.
Great stuff. Mark was a great guy. Shame tragic passing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And so, Ed and I think we ran one more ACW show after that, and then we just couldn't do it anymore. And Ed was starting to work with ECW at that time, and then I had already started my referee career at that point. And so I actually got to referee for ECW at the very first Hamburg Fieldhouse show in 93. So it was like September 93 or 94.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was actually on that show.
Yeah, and I did a couple matches, and I think the last match I did was the baseball bat match between Axel and Ian and the that's the picture.
There we go.
That's from the Fieldhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it was okay. I just I think that I came up more as a traditional style referee and everything. So ECW really just wasn't a particular fit for me.
Right.
So I didn't really stay with them after that. I came back to Maryland. I ref for a couple independents like MEWF and a couple of the other ones that were here in Maryland. And I did that for a couple of years. And then around 99 or 2000, I found out that the promoter from NWA New York was actually moving to Virginia. And he was opening NWA Virginia at that point. And so I got in contact with him. And that's when I started refereeing for NWA. And I did that for about 8 years. Yep, that particular picture, that is from the NWA Legends Fan Fest in Charlotte in 2007. This was part of the NWA World Title Tournament that took place after the NWA got the belts back from TNA. So I got to referee a semifinal match between Claudio Castagnoli, who everybody knows as Cesaro, and Brent Albright.
What year was that, Jeff?
That was 2007.
2007.
Yeah. So so I did a lot of great cards for the NWA. I got to referee at the NWA 57th anniversary show in 2005 in Nashville. And the big match I did on that card was the NWA British Commonwealth title match, which was again Fergal Devitt, who everybody now knows as Finn Balor, and Drew Onyx from Canada. So I got to do that match amongst other matches on that show. So that was really good. And I stayed with the NWA until 2008. Mm-hmm. My last match with them was an NWA World Title match, which was Adam Pearce against Damian Wayne, and that went an hour Broadway. That was an hour time limit draw.
Wow.
So
wow.
So I did that, and then I actually got out of the business at that point. 2008 wasn't a particularly good year for the business. I mean, there were a lot of changes going on, and not particularly for the better. So I stepped away from it at that point, which was, I had been doing it for, like I said, at that point, I'd been refereeing for like 15 years or so, and I had been in the business even longer than that. So it was kind of a change for me to just walk away from it. And just say, you know what, I'm really done. I just felt it, more time for the family and everything. My daughter was like 8 years old at that point. And, just decided, I wasn't seeing anything that I really liked. And I just basically stopped. I stopped watching it on television. I stopped reading the magazines and sheets. I kept in touch with a few people that I had worked with and stuff like that, but I really just didn't have any interest at all at the business at that point. And then around 2015, it was around 2015, 2016, I got contacted by Ricky Blues. Ricky was a wrestler, a light heavyweight from Maryland. He was writing a book about professional wrestling, and especially about the situations that had happened in Baltimore over the years. And he interviewed me for the book, and I gave my thoughts and all that, and then he and Tim Walker started a little podcast show called Pioneers of the Independent Networks, which basically covered this area with the Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey area, from the beginnings of independent wrestling, like in the late 80s through today. And then Ed and I got back together at that point, and Ed was living in North Carolina at that time. He still is, actually. And he said, "Hey, you know what? I think you should come down and see these guys that I'm watching right now. There's a group called PWX, Premier Wrestling Experience, which was running in. They were based in Charlotte, and they were running through the Carolinas." He says, "I think if you liked what we did, when we were doing it then, wait till you see what these guys are doing now." So I started making monthly trips to North Carolina, which was interesting because it's a 7-hour trip. It's a 7-hour ride one way to Charlotte. So I started doing that. Got involved with PWX, started working for them, and in 2018, I put the stripes back on again. So I got to referee for PWX for about a year and a half, and then unfortunately I had some medical issues crop up at that point, and I decided, you know what, I really can't do this anymore. I just can't. I can't risk my health at this point to be involved in the ring. So I put away the stripes for the final time. I just continued to work with them for a while and try to mentor people, especially referees, at that point, because I don't feel that a lot of the schools are really training referees. They're basically training wrestlers. And it's a shame because, to do that, but there's a lot of good referees right now in the Carolinas, and Jared Fritz is one of them. He works for the NWA now as well. And then there's a young lady named Yolanda Wright and Kevin Pierce and Chris Wiggins. There's a couple of those folks down there that are really good referees. And I basically still support independent wrestling to this day. Hopefully now that COVID's kind of taken its toll on everybody, hopefully I can start traveling again a little bit and get back down there to the shows and start watching them again. And, I try to watch stuff on YouTube. I like watching AAA out of Mexico. I think they do some really great stuff down there. And I watch AEW a lot right now on television. And, like I said, I got a chance. One of the things I did that I really liked is my daughter got a chance to see me referee, and that was a big. Awesome. That was a big deal for me that I was able to have her go to the shows, and I made sure that her first live show was an independent show. Yeah, that's us at the PWX Headlocks for Hospital show. That was November of 2018. Matter of fact, that was her birthday week, so I took her down there for her birthday, and she got to meet James Storm and a bunch of the local guys and stuff like that. So yeah.
I'm kind of just zooming through your timeline here.
Yeah. So a lot of different people. Yeah, Joey Ryan. At one of the PWX shows, and James D. Drake. That's my buddy. I like James. I'm really glad he's with PWX or with AEW. Yep, we got to meet Teddy Long at one of the shows.
Awesome.
Yep, and that was me refereeing the Barbarian in 2004. That was for the NWA Virginia title.
Right.
So live to tell that tale. And there's Brian Pillman Jr. And that was at the PWX show. That was before he got signed to AEW.
Right.
So, and there's Nikita Koloff. That was the second time I had met Nikita, and I had met him back in '89.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Yep, that was the original picture.
No, we were part of the same wrestling radio fan club group.
Right.
Yours was in Maryland, mine was in Pennsylvania. Right. So we have a lot of the same meet and greet pictures.
Yeah.
From back in the day, 88, 87, yeah. 88, 89.
This was Jushin Liger on his retirement tour when he actually wrestled in Charlotte as part of the U.S. shows that he did in his retirement year. And that was the second time I met Jushin Liger. And I had actually met him in 1992 at John Arezzi's Weekend of Champions.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
In New York. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to get a picture with him then, but I made sure at that point that, yep, that was me. I was having the U.S. belt. And there's Ed Zahn right behind there with the black hat on.
All right.
Yeah.
Who's this fella?
That's Ed. That's Ed.
Who's that big guy?
Yeah. He just got married, so I was down there this week. He just got married, so yeah, we've been best friends for 33 years. I mean, it's, I owe everything to him. He taught me everything I know. Yep. That's Ian Maxwell. That was with the PWX Pure title.
Oh, this is some great stuff.
Yep.
There's
Claudio Castagnoli, or Cesaro, as we know him now.
All right. And then here's a shot. What's going on there?
That's Rob Killjoy, one of the Ugly Ducklings. They had a weapons match or whatever. He got put through a table, so I was down there. I think it was a ladder match. Yep, that's what one of the PWX shows.
Oh, okay, ladder match.
Yeah, the ladder match and the trash cans and the whole 9 yards. So,
wow.
Yep.
So, what year was PWX again?
They're still running, but I started going to their shows in 2016. They're still running in the Charlotte. They run between Charlotte and some places. There's Slim J with the X16 trophy. That's a tournament that PWX runs every year. They have a 16-person elimination tournament that they run each year, and the winner gets a trophy and a shot at the PWX title. Up there's Serpentico, as people recognize him from AEW. There's Savid El Sabah. He's a great wrestler. I really like that guy. There's Darius Lockhart there on the left, and Savid El Sabah on the right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And there's that lovely little lady.
There's my daughter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was
some great shots. Who's
Tommy
Young?
Tommy Young. Yeah, Tommy showed up. They had they were working with the Crockett Foundation, and Tommy does appearances through the Crockett Foundation, and we were chit-chatting for a while and stuff. It was really great to meet him. Of course, I had patterned a lot of my.
I was just going to ask that. Who were your influences as far as referees went? When you were first starting out, who did you kind of look at and say, "Oh, I'd kind of like to,"
Well, I watched a lot of the NWA guys, Tommy especially, for that, because again, I kind of like that traditional style that they did, so I patterned myself. The funny thing is, I was never formally trained. I never had any formal training. I literally got a phone call one night in November of '93 from Axel Rotten saying, "Hey, we got a card coming up here in November of '93 at a high school here in Maryland. And we need it. One of our referees dropped out. We need one." He goes, "I know you study the matches. I know you know what you need to do. Just get a striped shirt, a dark pair of pants, and show up at the card."
There you go.
And I went up doing an 8-person tag team match.
Wow.
And actually, Tony Stetson and Johnny Hotbody were there. It was Axel and Ian, and then I think there were a couple of local guys. I lasted through most of the match until Axel hit me in the head with a metal chair.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and anybody who ever worked with Axel know he does not work. He did not work light.
No,
I can tell you that right now. I got one hand up on to kind of try to block it. My whole hand was black and blue for a week. I thought for sure I had broken it.
Oh, poor Jeff.
Yeah.
He tried to throw me out of the window.
That was a shot there. Nikolai Volkov. We had taken him to the. That was actually one of the last shows that he did before he passed away. Oh, that's Julie Blanton there, and that was an independent show in Virginia that I took him to.
Cute.
Yeah.
Oh, Nikolai.
Yeah.
And there goes. Who's this fella?
Oh, that's and now I'm gonna forget his name. Oh, he's in WWE now. Oh, Cedric Alexander. Goodness gracious.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, Cedric had actually started out at PWX, and then now he's there. And
I see Ed Zahn's got his own T-shirt, huh?
Yeah, he does. He does.
That's great. I'm an Ed Zahn guy.
Yeah. Ed's one of those guys. I can't say enough about Ed. I think there's a ton of people right now that owe a lot to Ed. He really gave a lot of people chances in the business, and he always ran quality shows. without a doubt. And he looked at it from a fan's perspective. I mean, he really respected the fans and really tried to run quality shows. And a lot of people don't know who he is, and that's it. And that's the way he liked it. I mean, he wasn't out there to put himself over. He wanted to put the workers over. He wanted to put the fans over. He wanted to run those shows so that everybody was happy, in what they did and all that kind of stuff. So, no, there's an oldie. That was one of the luncheons. That was the rock.
That's
and roll.
why I stopped at this one. I think.
Yeah, and actually, if you notice, they're both wearing bracelets on their wrist.
Yes.
Those bracelets were actually replicas of the NWA World Tag Titles, and both of them had one.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember those days of the the Wrestling Radio fan club.
Yeah.
The meet and greets.
Yeah.
Everywhere. I think we got to meet people that a lot of fans didn't get the opportunity to meet, and we were such small groups, in different cities, but small, very candid.
Yeah. Nobody was doing that at the time. I mean, now kind of everybody does meet and greets, but that was one of those things that Joel kind of innovated that people just because, and again, too, I understand part of it is the travel schedules, especially at that time, because as we all know, those guys were on the road 50 weeks out of the year, and they were basically just going from town to town to town to town, and there wasn't a lot of time for that to do all that. So, it was kind of great to kind of meet these guys outside of the, the wrestling shows and stuff like that. Yep, there's the Stinger.
Here's another one.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great group to get an opportunity to meet the guys that you normally wouldn't have an opportunity to get close to. That's a nice shiny belt there. So
yeah, that was the NWA Continental belt. They ran that down in Virginia and Carolina for a while.
Nice, very nice. And let's see. So just going through your Facebook pictures here. You work for the National Wrestling Alliance for a while. Tommy, did you have any questions for Jeff?
No, I was going to comment on Axel Rotten. He had me halfway out the window at the Elks Lodge in Queens. And then on top of that, he showed me a pair of scissors, like Fiskars with the orange handle. He said, at some point in the match, I'll pull these out. And on one side is like this little serrated, and the other one is just flat. He says, of course I'll turn it over, and this way if I do touch you with it, it won't get the serrated. Well, no, he did not turn it over. And while he's pushing down, I guess, sometimes during the heat of a match, you're not realizing how hard you're pushing down. I actually had to push away.
Sure.
Just to keep him from really, I got a pretty good one, but yeah, so he tried to throw me out the window, and then he lacerated me with the serrated side of the scissors. So
yeah,
you had to be careful with him because he would go a little bit too far sometimes.
Oh,
I don't think it was intentional. He just would get carried away. But you got to keep your head about you. When you're doing something like that, and somebody else's health is in your hands.
Exactly.
Fine, for sure.
So, Jeff, what do you think about the current product and the future of professional wrestling? You could take a second to think about that.
We're in an interesting time right now. One of the things I do like about the product is there's something for everyone out there. Back in the day, and I know, we can all talk about it. When you had the territory days and stuff, it was very specific about what you saw. WWF ran their style of wrestling. Mid-Atlantic ran their style. World Class ran their style. But the problem was a lot of people weren't able to be exposed to that. And, nowadays with the internet and everything we have, you can watch everything. You can go back and watch those old shows. You can watch all the new shows. You can watch all the, the great stuff that's out there. But there's basically a style of wrestling for everyone that's out there. What I worry about sometimes is I worry about the quality of some of the shows. I like to go to a show that, that where I see people making a real effort at what they're doing. And it doesn't always work out that way. And it's just, sometimes, and unfortunately we know because we've all experienced it. There's unscrupulous promoters out there. There's unscrupulous workers that are out there. Those things I try to avoid, but the problem is that's the stuff a lot of times that gets publicized. And I think that it hurts the business because I'm sure it turns people off, especially who may be just casual fans or maybe thinking about, being a fan of wrestling. And you hear all these, these terrible stories that come out and things that happen in the business. We talk a lot about the Me Too movement and everything that's going on with that. And it's terrible. And it unfortunately a lot of times overshadows a lot of the good that's being done in wrestling. Because I see a lot of the promotions doing great shows for charities or to do specifically for a person who maybe needs help for medical expenses or things like that. Those shows kind of get overlooked because everybody's looking for the dirty part of the business, which, I know it's not going to be ever eliminated completely, unfortunately, but, I hope that people will try to look past that and try to look at the good that the wrestling is doing right now. I'm excited with the product, the mainstream product. I'm still not a WWE fan. I just can't really get behind the product at this point. And it's unbelievable that they have a roster the size that they have. And they have 3 major television shows and they're on 6 or 7 hours a week. And they can't seem to fill it with anything good. And they don't let these people be who they are. And because matter of fact, I just heard today, I think that Cesaro, apparently he's left WWE. And there's a guy who I've worked with personally, and I know what type of wrestler he is, and he's a fantastic wrestler. And I think that they just get pigeonholed by WWE into doing, these ridiculous gimmicks, or they change their characters so badly that it just becomes hard for them to work. And I think I can't speak personally, but I feel that maybe the workers get disillusioned with that. Yeah, maybe they're making good money and stuff, but if they're not, it's a craft, it's an art. And if you can't be the artist that you want to be, then you get bored with it or you just get dissatisfied with it. I mean, you see some of these guys, especially that have left WWE and go to AEW. I mean, you could just tell their demeanor's totally different. I watched the Keith Lee debut on that. I mean, you could just tell he was happy to be there, and they did a really good job with his debut, and hopefully they'll be able to keep it. And again, he's Keith Lee. He's not Bearcat. He's not anything else. He's Keith Lee. And that's what they're doing. The same with like Bryan Danielson and a bunch of the other guys that are there. Now they're letting them be themselves and be the characters that everybody and do the wrestling that everybody expects them to do. And, and I'm hoping that eventually, I think the competition between AEW and WWE is a good thing. Competition is always good. And I think that Vince has been on his own so long, basically since WCW and ECW went away, or he bought them, that he's gotten a little arrogant in what he does. And granted, I know he's making gobs of money, but to me, it's tough that wrestling fans that the last 20 years had nothing but WWE. There really wasn't anything out there, at least on mainstream television, that other than that. And hopefully now that they see that the AEW and they start seeing that there are things that are different, and they're doing other things too. I mean, AEW is helping highlight Impact and New Japan and AAA and all this other stuff that's going on. So they're doing a good job of exposing the fans that, hey, we're not the only game in town. There's other ones out here. Here's these guys are over here from Impact. These guys are in from New Japan and vice versa and all that kind of stuff. And kind of opening up that door and, giving the fans a little bit of a choice out there.
It's always nice when the promotions start to work together. So then they give the fans a bit of variety in what they're seeing on a weekly program, because, no one wants to watch the same stale roster on, 5 different shows of 5 different titles, but you have the same people on there. Right. So it's always good to see people expand and start to use other talent and give the exposure where it's really necessary.
Yeah, so, and I'm sure the workers like it too, because again, especially when you're exchanging talent between the promotions, it's giving them the chance to work in a different company, maybe a different style of wrestling than what they're used to, and kind of, helping them to be better wrestlers because they're having to work a different way than maybe they've been used to.
Right. So is there anything in the future that you might look forward to maybe considering attending as far as wrestling goes? Is if it's just like work wise, maybe you want to come back as a referee, or maybe promoting wise, or maybe even just as a fan. Are you interested in anything in the near future that, you know, we might be?
Yeah, I think basically, I'm at this point in my life, I'm pretty much just a fan. I don't think I'm going to be. I'm not really capable to get back in the ring. I am planning to go back down to the Carolinas. I like to start seeing a couple of the independent shows. There's APW that runs in South Carolina. There's AML that runs in North Carolina. There's a couple other, little promotions that are down there. I basically, if I go to shows, I like to go to the independent shows. I like to see these up and comers, come along and try to do that and stuff. And, I'm always willing to mentor people. If people want to ask me questions and all that, I'm certainly willing to share my knowledge, with them and give them advice. And hopefully they can, hopefully it helps them in some way to be a better, whatever it is, referee, worker, whatever, and I'm always, when I go to shows, I always give my time to them. I always try to help out with setup and breakdown. And, I've done that for a long time. Ted Petty was one of the guys that taught me how to do a ring.
Okay.
Ed and I worked with Ted for a lot of years, doing ring rentals and things like that, and worked with him and just, just type that. And that's what I would encourage too for people. If you're thinking about getting into business, learn that stuff. Learn how to do the ring, learn how to do setup, learn how to do breakdowns, learn how to, just work on those things. Make yourself more valuable to the promotion by being willing to do those things and get your foot in the door. Because that's when I started. I basically started in the front office. I was never a wrestler. I didn't start to be a referee. I kind of worked at, I guess, opposite from what a lot of people do. A lot of people get in as workers right away and then maybe transition to a front office, maybe later on down the line. Now I kind of did it backwards, but it's whatever worked for you.
Right, exactly. Whatever order works for you, right? And it did work for you, all the way into how many decades?
We're going on four now, four decades at least at this point.
So you absolutely did something right.
Yeah, that's one of those things, and it's just, I'm just thrilled. This was like a childhood dream, and I've got into it. And I've gone way farther in it than I really expected to. I didn't think that I would ever be in the ring. I didn't think I would referee people. I didn't think I would be helping run shows and all that kind of stuff. So I've been very, very fortunate that I got to do that for as long as I have been doing it, and I just encourage everyone to continue to support, and especially independent wrestling, support those small promotions that are just trying to, eke out a little bit of a living. And hey, you never know, Ric Flair didn't start out being Ric Flair right off the bat. They all had to start somewhere. And you might be surprised. You see, like I said, I see a lot of these people now, people I know, like Lady Frost. I know Lady Frost very well. She started off, her dad her grandfather wrestled in the Pittsburgh studio wrestling. Back in the day with Bruno. So she's got a family tie to it. But now she's with Impact. And JD Drake, we talked about James Drake. He's now in AEW. Those I love those stories. That's the stories I really love. I love seeing people that I know who have been able to move on to that next level and get the just due that they deserve, because they've been busting their butts for years and years to try to get to that level. And now they've got those breaks. But when you go to those shows, you may be seeing those next people who are going to be the next AEW World Champion or WWE World Champion or going to New Japan or wherever it is that they go. You just never know until you try it out.
You really don't. And for those people that bust their humps working hard, definitely do deserve it. And, congratulations to those who make it to that level. There's some that never get a chance to.
And I want to speak on that point real quick. If you're a wrestler or referee or whatever, if you don't ever get to AEW or WWE or something like that, you're not a failure. Okay?
No,
and we all know it's a triangle. And the closer you get to the top, the smaller it gets. So it's being like anything. It's being a rock star or a pro football player, a pro athlete of any point. There's only that small percentage that are going to get to to that point. Some of it's skill, a lot of it's luck. A lot of it's being in the right place at the right time and the right people see you.
Who
Just because you don't get to that point, just because you don't get to that point, you're not a failure.
Right.
Okay. And some people may not be built for that type of thing. I look at, you look at, we look at those wrestling schedules. Some people just can't be on the road that much. That's a hard life. And we've all seen, unfortunately, the horror stories that come out of that, and things about addictions and bad times and broken families because of it and all that. It's not for everybody. You have to decide for yourself if you do it. And if you just stay at being an independent wrestler on the local level, hey, that's great. You're already ahead of the game in my book, that you've gotten to that point.
Yeah, especially when you look at, like, all three of us sitting here all started with the same story. I became a wrestling fan when my uncle brought me to the match. I saw it on TV. And so if we all started with that, our intention at that point of being a fan, we didn't even think about,
Sure.
that early, if we would ever. So you're right. I mean, if you make one move beyond being a fan, you've done more than you originally anticipated. I mean, until I was able enough physically to maybe even think about it, I really didn't. I was like 160 when I started thinking about it. I didn't start thinking about it when I was 10. I wasn't like a young kid. I want to be a police officer. I wanted to watch wrestling. That's all I wanted to do at that point. And then, you fast forward, and all of us have had our successes, and I consider myself lucky to have been a part of it. And I think that's where the problem is today. These kids don't realize that a good percentage of them would never have had a shot many years ago, because the criteria was much different. So,
well, no, it was a closed system too.
Yeah.
I mean, if we really think about it, we think about the NWA, we talk about the NWA a lot. That was really formed to monopolize the business.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They controlled it. And if you weren't part of the NWA, you weren't part of it. I mean,
you were an outlaw.
You weren't part. You were blacklisted. If you tried to run shows or if you worked for someone else you weren't supposed to, you basically got kicked out of the business at that point. And they had an absolute iron grip on everything at that point. And it wasn't until later on, until they started breaking up a little bit, and then they started off, and then remember, independent shows weren't called independent; they were called outlaw shows.
Outlaw.
Yeah, we just covered that yesterday.
You're just
So, that's
actually, you and Ed Zahn were under the outlaw list for the states of Maryland and Pennsylvania.
I saw that at one time. We got a big kick out of that. I was like, what? Of course, that term hasn't been used for a lot of years, but
Right.
at that point, by the time we started, like I said, the NWA's grip had basically been broken on the business. So it was. I saw that listing at one time. We got a good laugh out of that.
Yeah, hey, you're in history as an outlaw, so
Right.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong
Jesse
with that.
James and all them, I guess.
Well, it's great when people get to live their dream and tell their story. And I know that, some people haven't heard your story. And I'm actually glad that we took time to sit here and listen to it, because I've learned a lot that, I did not know about Jeffrey T. Capo. And I'm certainly glad that we sat here and asked. So hope you've enjoyed your time here telling
I appreciate you having me on. This has been great.
Do you have any social media outlets or anything to promote, or anything you want to get out there?
I'm on Facebook as Jeffrey T. Capo. I'm on Twitter as Jeff Capo. That's basically the only two I do right now. So I'm always there, and people feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to share pictures or stories or whatever they want. So I'm always happy to talk to folks.
When I do a roundtable, maybe I know you probably know Fred Rubenstein, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, maybe we'll do a roundtable with a couple of referees, you and
That'd be
Fred,
great.
and maybe we'll get somebody else, George Panaha or somebody.
Sure.
Oh, that sounds fantastic, Tommy. The referee roundtable actually would be, I think, classic stories from, all of you. So we'll get to that one day. We'll talk about referee roundtable. And until then, thank you for joining Wrestling Rewind. I am your host, Angel Amoroso, and my co-host, the Iron Man, Tommy Cairo.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jeffrey T. Capo.
Thank you.
Enjoyed having you and hearing about your story. And if you want to get in touch with Jeff, he's on Facebook and Twitter. So get over to Jeff. Thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Wrestling Rewind. We enjoyed having Jeffrey T. Capo as our guest. We learned so much about him, and we hope that you'll join us on Wrestling Rewind next week, Sunday at 7 p.m. on YouTube, Monte and the Pharaoh's Network. And for myself, Angel Amoroso, and my co-host, the Iron Man, Tommy Cairo, have a nice night and a nice life. Good night.